Hello and welcome to Jessie James Beads, live on Facebook, later uploaded to the blog and YouTube. How are you doing today? It's incredibly chilly here in the UK today. Not super cold, it just went from summer to autumn very, very quickly, and I'm never prepared for it. How are you today? What have you been up to? Give me your weather report. What have you got planned for your day? It's just a little past 6 p.m. here in the UK. So that must make it 1 p.m. on the East Coast. I'll learn it all one day, I promise. For our wire tutorial today here on Facebook for Jessie James Beads, I'm going to be working with a beautiful mini mix called Strawberry Rhubarb. Now, the description is a real summer mix, and I know that I'm craving the heat of summer. I would very much like to be slightly warmer than I am. In addition to the mini mix in Strawberry Rhubarb, I've chosen one of the pendants. Now, there's quite a selection of these natural gem pendants available. I've listed the two that I'm using today, as well as a whole raft of others to choose from. I've also popped a link in the description for the video to Strawberry Rhubarb and to I can't do words today. How terribly rude. To the individual pendants. There we are. We found some words. Let's just pop down to the board and take a look at what we're going to make. And I will make sure that we are indeed all here together. And I'm not just Billy No Mates all by myself. So that's the project we're going to make today. A really fun way to use up bits and pieces of chain that you've got left over from other projects. I'm blending it with my beautiful Strawberry Rhubarb mini mix, and I'm also bringing in one of these gorgeous large pendants. Charms and pendants together have a real dynamism. I love how they can move around. So I'm just going to pop over to Facebook and make sure that we are indeed all hanging out. And if anybody's there with me, I have got Jessica, Huggles, Gem and everyone. Celia, good evening. Jessica's had a hurricane. Oh my gosh, my heart goes out to you all in Florida. Stay safe. And anywhere else affected by adverse weather conditions. Linda is in. Patty is in. Glad to see you too, my treasure. Tutau is in. You're in the southern region as well, Tutau, are you? I cannot quite remember. Welcome to you one and all. I hope that you're keeping as well and safe as you possibly can be. Welcome to Jessie James Beads. So my project today, we are going to be using that gorgeous Strawberry Rhubarb. Just taken the lid off so you can see the vibrancy of some of those beads. And we're going to grab some of those in a minute and work with them. Jessica is working on a necklace from the August but whilst watching. Well, we'd love to see that. Don't forget to pop that in the but group so we can all have a look and be inspired by what you're working on. Patty says, beautiful necklace. Tutau says, yes, but in Houston. I knew that you were on the more southerly reaches. Completely the wrong side. Sorry about that, darling. Cherie, hi. Just got off a show in Orlando. They got hit pretty hard. I'm so sorry to hear that. I have good friends in Orlando, just outside Orlando in Castleberry. Very beautiful little burg. Very lovely place to visit. So stay well and stay safe. Gem, stubby fingers, guru. Darling, I have cold fingers and broken fingers as well, so I feel your pain. Never worry, my sweet. It's all good. Let's just pop back up to me for a hot minute. I've given you a bit of a look at what we're going to work with today. Completely beginners friendly. You only need basic tools. I have got my flush set. So these are nice and flat on the inside. Bent chain nose pliers. They're quite tapered. They're really handy to have tapered ones. I've also got some semi-flush cutters. These are excellent. These are from our friends at Bead, and I adore them. I don't want any other brand in my life. I've also got a very standard set of round nose pliers. If you do want to add some coils in later, it's always a little bit easier to start with a round nose plier. Hi, Anne is in from California. I hope you're doing well, my lovely. How's tricks? What have you been up to? So we're also going to be working with chain scraps. I don't know about you, but when I get a beautiful length of chain from Jessie James Beads, don't always want to use all of it, so I'm often ending up with little offcuts. So I save them all in a bag. That's admittedly quite a long offcut. Some of them are a bit shorter than that. So if I have a couple that are the same size, I bag them ready for bits and pieces necklaces or bits and pieces bracelets. So I've got a handful of chain segments as well, which you're going to wrap together with wire and that beautiful strawberry rhubarb. So this is a bit of a late summer fun, interesting piece that you can customise endlessly. Patty says, I keep losing the sound. Am I the only one? Can you hear me? Can the rest of you hear me okay? Give me a quick thumbs up if you're all okay. Happy Thursday from Texas, says Becky. Welcome to you, my darling. I hope that you are keeping well also. So is everybody else having good sound? I do hope so. Now, I'm planning on using 18 gauge round wire today. I'm working with the Beadalon German style. Silver colour, and it's round, so it's a medium temper. Pretty much any wire will work. Sound is all good elsewhere, Patty. I'm sorry, that may be a local issue for you. Anne is well and working on a painted purple dragon eye and a glass cabochon. Just received a massive bag of dragon eye cabs. So beautiful. Linda is hearing okay. Alice is hearing okay. Sophia is getting sound okay. Yep, sorry, my darling, that may be local to you. What I also have to one side is a small amount of 20 gauge round wire. Now that's purely because sometimes the drill aperture on very, very tiny beads would definitely prefer some 20 gauge. And also some of your chains might prefer a little bit. If you're going to work in a rosary linking fashion, which is what we're going to do today, it's often quite handy to have a slightly finer 20 gauge wire just in case you have small apertures. By the time we've wrapped around the core wire a couple of times, it's actually a lot stronger than you might think. So it's always worth just having a small reel of 20 gauge on the side. I'm just sitting here happily playing with my chain scraps. Let's pop you back down to the board. I'm getting lots of thumbs up, my darlings. Judy says, newbie question, what is the difference between German wire and regular wire? So my understanding, and I am not the expert, I don't create wire, I use it. The wire that I use most often is a copper wire. This is a very heavy copper wire that I have here. It's raw copper and it's quite malleable. So that is what is known in the industry as a soft wire. German style wire tends to have a medium temper, and what that means is when you get it straight out of the packet, it's a little bit twangy. It's already got some residual strength to it. All 18 gauge wire is going to be precisely 1 millimetre from one edge to the other edge. It's always the same size, but dependent on how it's been treated during manufacturing is how firm it is to work. So some projects will absolutely require you have a hard wire. Now I just purchased quite recently some steel wire. Wow, so hard. My fingers were like little stumps by the end of it. I didn't enjoy it one little bit. So the stainless steel wire that I was working with the other day, very, very hard wire. German style, you can use it for almost anything. It's a medium temper, it's quite springy, takes you a little bit more effort to make it feel warm so that you can touch it on the back of your hand and definitely feel that heat. So with a raw copper, you just run that between thumb and forefinger a couple of times and it's super toasty really quickly. This one takes a little bit more effort, however, perfect for all of your jewellery projects. I've not come across an instance where I can't use German wire in my wire working, so it's a great all-rounder. Soft wires sometimes simply will be too fluid for your end product. So what you can do is just up the gauge of the wire slightly if you need to, or you can hammer it, or you can squash it between the pliers and just make a sound on it, hopefully not marking it too much, but that will strengthen it as well. So you've got some options, but German style is a good all-rounder. Jacqueline says, hi from Florida, made it safely through the hurricane. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy that you're there safe, my darling. Good morning, excited to be here. Paula, welcome to you, sweet pea. How are you? Hi, Jen. Margaret is in from beautiful city of Edinburgh. We are all happy to hear that you are safe, my darling. Yeah. Anybody who is currently experiencing adverse weather, my heart goes out to you, and I do hope that you and your loved ones stay safe. Obviously there's a lot more to it than that, but you have my love and thoughts anyway. So I'm working with German style round wire today, primarily in that 18 gauge. Judy says thank you incredibly much. Indeed. I can't see what that's in reply to, but also thank you from me for whatever it was. Let's have another look on the overhead camera at our project and get cracking with what we're going to work on today. So as I mentioned, if you've only just joined us, I'm making a bit of a bits and pieces project together with you today. I've got some chain scraps. They're not very long. Some of these pieces that I added into the demonstration piece that's on the board already are quite short. I've added a beautiful Jessie James Beads clasp at the back there. And I've interspersed these chain sections with rosary linked pieces from the Strawberry Rhubarb, that beautiful summery warmth that I am craving right now. Lisa is in from Virginia. Hello to you, sweet pea. I hope that you are well. And says, happy to hear you are safe and can watch the JJB gem tutorial. Prayers to those caught in the hurricane. We are all thinking of you. So this is what my project ended up looking like. Now, I didn't intend to make quite such a long necklace. I quite like to wear mine at around the 15 or 16 inch length, so that my pendants are quite high up on the neckline. If you end up like I have and make a really long piece, don't worry about it. It'll be perfectly suitable for sweater weather. Wear it over those roll necks. Wear it long and proud. Something like this is lots of fun because you've got those different colours and things. Really beautiful chains from Jessie James Beads here. So I'm going to pop this out of the way. I will show you how to add two sections of chain together, bearing in mind if you want to, you can add in a bit of 20 gauge if your wire simply won't go through the apertures available. Let's pop this up to the side for now, so you can still see that centerpiece. The thing I really love about this more than anything is the mobility. Everything woggles around, everything moves, it's beautifully fluid, so much fun to make. So what we're going to do is have a look at the pieces that we're working with. Christina's in from the UK. Welcome to you, my lovely. Whereabouts are you? Margaret says, love this gem. Thank you, darling. Judy says, joining from Albuquerque, New Mexico, right before International Balloon Fiesta begins. That sounds like so much fun. Celia's just had a severe rain warning for tomorrow in the Manchester area as the hurricane hits this side of the pond. Oh gosh, I didn't realise it was on its way over. Yikes. Stay safe all. Cherie says, really pretty necklace. This would also look pretty for the 4th of July in America. Absolutely. There was a small subconscious part of me that noted that I was going for blues and reds and the white of the metals as well. I thought it was a really cool project for any time of the year, but absolutely yes. So I'll also show you how to make a couple of charms that you can add on to the chain almost anywhere. But let's look at what we're going to work with. Now, in your Strawberry Rhubarb mini mix, one of my favourite tea has got strawberry and rhubarb in. Peterborough. My cousin Lisa has just moved back from Peterborough to Stratford-upon-Avon. You get lots of hot reds and some more warm, sort of rounded red colours as well. You get one of these beautiful charms, which is a sort of a 3D flower with a crystal style centre. That's really beautiful. I've only got one of those in the mix, so I'm going to show you an alternative with one of these gorgeous fancy frou-frou like charms. It will work in exactly the same way. You have an aperture through which you would normally attach this. In whichever way you normally work with charms. Sometimes they just go on a bracelet and it's all well and good. You've got a couple of these large teardrops, darker crystals, lighter crystals, metallics. Oh, and these are gorgeous as well. Dinky little bead caps, I suppose, but they're so pretty. So there's lots to play with in your Strawberry Rhubarb. Let's pop that out of the way for now. And we're going to work on the feature piece to begin with. That was just holding my mini mix up in the corner, so we'll pop that back for now. Thank you very much for all of your kind words. Bev is in from PA. Is that Philadelphia? I don't know my American geography. I'm so sorry. Yes, welcome to you anyway, wherever abouts you are from, my sweet pea. So I have got a large oversized pendant. Now I did add a direct link to both this pendant and this pendant in the video description. If you fancy grabbing one for yourself, they are beautiful. It's electro formed around the edges. So it's super snug to the actual gemstone. It's a real beautiful thing to work with. So this is a druzy filled agate of some description. And honestly, I'm not 100% sure what this gemstone is. It could be a chalcedony. It's very, very pretty. It could even be a slightly slimline jasper. Any road, let's have a look at what we're going to do. I'm going to grab myself some of that German style wire. And I'm just going to unspool probably around about 8 inches. Now that's probably quite generous for what we need. But the one lesson I've learnt in wire working more than any other lesson over the sort of 8 years I've been working with wire is that too much is better than not enough. So what we're going to do is make a large loop down at the base of this wire. And that large loop is going to accommodate both the pendant and the charm. So if you have access to a multi-step bail maker, these are my Beadalon multi-step bail makers, it's really helpful to have that extra size. If you don't, you can simply use a pen. This is a very, very funky, very me style pen. Something like that will help you to get that large round shape. Sherby's also in from PA, so the pair of you together, happy days. So what I'm going to do is come about probably 2/3 of the way along, and I'm going to put a bend in that wire. It's a right angle bend to begin with. It's always round, Anne. I always work with round wire because it is very friendly to beginners, and my speciality is teaching wire work to people who are either terrified of it or new to it. So this is a round German style in 18 gauge silver colour. I'm going to probably, I think, choose to work with number 5 on my multi-step bail makers. As I said, you could work with a pencil or similar if you wished to. So I'm going to just pop that in and create a round form. Draw that wire all the way around. So you can see we've got a very sizable circular form. No problem, sweetheart. I'm just going to make sure that that's flat. And then I'm going to open it out again. So much like you would open a jump ring, I'm just going to prise that apart gently. And what I want to do is probably have this as the front side of my pendant, just because I like to have the front side where the angle is. There's no rhyme or logic to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is decide which way I want my pendant to face up. It's beautiful from both sides, but this is the side I want it to face upwards. So I'm going to face that down for a second and allow it to slide all the way down into position. Once you've got the pendant sighted, we want to add the charm. Now, you can add the charm over the surface by sliding it down the long post at the top and bringing it to sit over the front of that pendant. Now, this is going to look slightly different to the flatter 3D charm here. Judy says new and terrified can go together. I feel you there, my lovely. So if I turn this sideways, you will see that I've got the front face, my chosen front face of the pendant, and in front of it I've added on the charm. So the two are going to coexist really nicely. What I want to do now is to support that large round form, and I'm going to do that with my bent chain nose pliers. I'm going to hold it all the way across. What I might do is just tweak the angle on that upright slightly so that it's more centralised. Can't see because the red charm has gone in the way. How rude. So I've got a straight line that comes down, and if you imagine that continues, it now transects all the way across that round form at the bottom. It's quite tricky with that little thing wiggling around all the way. So I'm going to support the round form. Don't worry about what they're doing for now, and I'm going to take that tail all the way around once and then push it over to the right hand side. So if I drop this down to the board, the loop is at 90 degrees to the board and the pendant is flat on the board with the charm, or whatever you've chosen to work with, sitting over the surface. What I want to do now is introduce a bead onto the upright, and this just adds a little bit more drama, a little bit more fun to your piece, and also gets us using some of these gorgeous beads from the Strawberry Rhubarb. So I'm going to use the exact same bead I used in the demonstration piece, which is a flattened faceted bead. It's got beautiful diamond shaped facets all the way around the edge. And that sits and fits really nicely on this 18 gauge wire. So I've allowed that to slide all the way down to where the side is coming away like so. What I want to do now is to make sure that my wire is really toasty warm. The reason I'm always telling you to warm the wire is because it will do more of what you want more easily, more often if you heat it through. And I'm not talking about applying a flame. Don't go and get that thing you do creme caramel with. You don't need to apply an actual flame to it. The heat of your body is enough to get this wire looking lovely and fluid. Now, whenever I'm working with a gemstone bead, a glass bead, something that has a special finish, I'm always aware that I might shatter the bead. Where did you purchase the stone? This is all in the video link description, Anne. This is all in the video description for you to go and check out. I've independently put those ones, but there's also a link to around a whole bunch of other gemstone pieces all ready to work with. So we're making sure that this side wire is super fluid and toasty, because what I want to do now is support the bead with my thumb and forefinger and draw the wire all the way around. So this wire has travelled around this core, it's come over to the right hand side, I've popped a bead onto that core wire, and then I'm bringing the wire across on top of the core wire again. So what I will do now is again really firmly pinch that bead into position and protect it by holding it firmly. A little bit more heat and warmth into the wire, and I'm going to draw that all the way around the core so it goes off to one side. So if I pop that down to the board, might not be perfectly square, so I'm just going to make that sit down so you can see where we are at so far. That is very, very kind of you, Jacqueline. I'm very, very grateful for your feedback. Thank you. I'm also a little bit shy about reading it out, so that's why I'm just saying thank you. So what I'm going to do for the next part is make a wrapped loop up at the top before I add a coil on, and that's so that I can use the coil to hide the mechanics. Now, if you want to, you can do what I have done for the demonstration piece, which is make quite a small loop. It's a relatively small loop I've created up top, which we'll be making just here in a second. And what that means is I can either connect two pieces of chain onto that loop with jump rings, or with the same wrapping technique we're going to use to add these two sections of chain together, or you can put the chain through and slide it up and down. Now, I realised after I'd done that, I wanted my central feature pendant with that overlying charm, I wanted it to be a little bit mobile. But what I realised was, because it was too mobile, my necklace was going to be all wonky. And although it's quite a wild necklace, it doesn't follow standard procedure, because you've got different pieces of chain joined with different beads, and there's bits hanging off it, and it's all quite good fun. I didn't want it to hang on the wonk. So I popped charms into the chain links either side of where I sighted this section, which is essentially it's a bail that we're creating for our pendant. It's quite a fancy one, and it's jointed, so you get a little bit more fun and a little bit more movement with it. You can have that just winding up and down on a piece of chain if you prefer, or you can take a piece of chain and link it directly, or you can add it onto chain and then keep it still with charm drops. That's what I think I might teach you today, which means I need another bit of chain from somewhere. I'm sure I've got a little scrap. Let's get a scrap of chain. And always a bit of chain and wire hanging around on my desk. So we're going to do the same thing. I just need to cut that down and get rid of the residue. I realised I've only got symmetrically cut pieces. Always keep your working board as clear as you possibly can so you don't accidentally stab yourself with a short bit of wire. Thank you, Margaret. You're very, very kind. Thank you so much for your kind words. So I am going to pop this onto a piece of chain. Therefore, I don't need to make an incredibly large loop. I just need to be able to get it onto the chain. So with that in mind, I'm going to pop the main feature piece up to the corner so you can see and refer to it if you wish to. Lots and lots of fun in wear. a bit of a piglet to get to sit neatly on a board. There we go. So I'm going to make a reasonably small loop, which is going to act as a bail. If you didn't want to go for all of the connected chains, all of the different chains put together, you could simply pop this on a chain, in which case make sure that your wrapped loop we're about to create now is large enough to accommodate whatever clasp you put at the back of your chain. So my loop needs to be in the same orientation as the loop that holds the pendant and the charm. So if I flop that sideways, pop my pliers in, I'm going to push that wire forwards just above the sideways wire. If I show you that flat on the board now, you'll see what I mean. The wire is coming up towards you. I'm going to create a loop here, and because it only needs to fit on the bit of chain, I don't need to overly worry about it. I can use either my standard round nose pliers, or I can use one of these slightly smaller pieces on my multi-step bail makers. I'm just going to grab hold with my standard round pliers and just turn that loop around exactly the same way. Wrapped loop, we're making sort of a shepherd's crook shape to begin with, and then we're going to draw that tail around. If you struggle and you don't have any multi-step bail makers, great investment incidentally, but if you don't have them and you make a loop and you think, gosh, that's actually not quite large enough, you can quite often, just very, very gently, coerce that loop to be a little bit larger and then draw the tail around. And it just saves you, if you've just made that circle and you think, gosh, that's a little bit small, you can manually move it slightly and don't overly worry about it. So I'm going to make sure that there's a complete circular form to begin with, and then I'm going to wrap this tail all the way around the core. So we were quite generous with the wire. We will be cutting a little bit away in just a moment. I'm going to draw that until I have filled the gap between the bead and the wrapped loop we've just created. If I take you to the rear side of the design, I'm just going to trim away neatly and then make sure that the end of that wire is pushed down flat. Bring you back to the front face of the design. So obviously this is quite a lot of fun with this little frou-frou charm, I want to call it. But if you have another one of these for yourself in your strawberry rhubarb mix, they are so much fun. So I've probably got a little bit more wire than I need. I'm just going to trim that to about 1.25 inches. And then I'm going to grab the end of that short section of wire that's sticking out at an angle. I'm going to start rotating my pliers around to get a round shape going. So hopefully you can see the round form there. And then I'm going to push that round form against my finger. Very, very slowly and small movements. People often ask me how I get my coils so neat and machined looking. And the answer is just take your time. It's very easy to mash things horribly when you're rushing. And when you get close to the centre of the design, let's just pop that down on the board again. What you can do is decide if you want to push the coil upwards, as I have done in my demonstration piece. And to do that, I'm just going to grip that disc-like coil and push it upwards against the wrapped loop that we've just made. So what we can do now is pop the chain through that wrapped loop. Whoops, all fingers and thumbs today. There we are. So if you decided that you wanted to have it slightly fluid on a piece of chain, or you simply wanted it completely fluid, then you don't need to worry about adding these charms. But I'm going to add a couple of those little charms. Let's have a look in the scrap pot. Not quite enough wire in there today. So let us find a little more. So I'm just going to give that a quick warm through. Probably only needs to be, let's say, about 2 inches in length. Certainly won't need to be any more than that. So if you have any 2-inch length scraps, you can grab a couple of those. Really good way to use up your scrap wires. This beautiful strawberry rhubarb bead mix, you're not using a huge amount of beads from it, but it is such a lovely summery colour. The first thing I will do is just make sure that I've got flush cuts on both ends of this piece of wire that we're going to use to make the charms with. It went down on the board. Let's get rid of that. And then I will make them exactly the same length, just in case I end up using all of them. So I've got 2 now lengths around about 1.75 inches. And what we're going to do is make some charms just to hold this charm drop pendant. There's the other piece that went AWOL. There we go. We want to keep that steady. You don't have to. This is an optional extra to your tutorial. And again, I'm going to make a coil in the same way. So I'm gripping the very end of the wire with the very tip of my round nose pliers. I'm going to start by creating a round form. Sorry about the bruise on my finger. I was recording a tutorial and I hit my finger with a hammer and I didn't even say any naughty words. I was very, very pleased with myself. So I've got 2 passes of wire. So from the centre we go around once and then around a second time. And then the wire comes away in a straight line. So what I tend to do when I'm making pieces like this and I'm looking for symmetry is I will endeavour to get 2 pieces as similar as possible in stages. It's much easier to see how different things are if you're making it a little at a time, and then you could theoretically go back and start again if you needed to. So they're pretty similar little weird golf club looking things right now. What we're going to do is turn a straight line away from that coil now. So if I go from underneath with my pliers, so I'm holding the coil flat, it's above the desk but it's in the same plane as the desk, and I'm just going to push that out now so that it comes away from that line and you end up with what we call a lollipop. I think that you call them, is it suckers maybe? Not entirely sure. Looks like a round object on the end of a stick and it's centralised. I can hear Shirley Temple singing in my ears now. So if I just make sure that everything is flat and straight, we've got 2 reasonably similar charm pieces to work with. Thank you, Margaret. So let's find a couple of beads that are going to work here. So in my original piece, I used these briolette cut pieces. I just need to find another one now. I don't think that's the same one. Let's just spill all those gorgeous beads out so that you can see them anyway. I'm sure I won't regret this in a minute. Here we go. Here's another one. You can use obviously whatever beads you fancy, but I quite fancy replicating the piece that I have on the board. Lollipops, that's them. So I'm just going to hold those side by side for a second and slide on the larger end first so that that's the lowest portion that you see. What I'm going to do now, because I'm craving symmetry, is flip one of them over. And if you look at them quite closely, you'll see that one of those coils is working anti-clockwise and one is looking clockwise, or counterclockwise if you prefer. Counterclockwise and clockwise anyway. So what I'm going to do now is create a simple openable loop at the top. For the first one, I'm going to grip very, very close to that bead but not touching it and just push the wire up. And before I decide to forget what I'm doing, I'm going to do the same on the other side. And what this means is that I will then have a mirror symmetry. Does that make sense? They're equal and opposite to each other. Anne calls them lollipops too. Good to know I am not alone. So I do actually want quite large open and closable loops. Thank you, Donna, that's very kind of you. So I'm going to use those round nose pliers, and in much the same way that I create a wrapped loop, I'm going to create a circular form at the top of those upside down lollipops. So let's go the same way on the other side. So we've got those circular forms. Now because I want open and closable loops here, what I want to do is to trim this tail of wire away where this section crosses over. So if I make the cut and show you, you'll be able to see exactly what I mean. So I trimmed the wire where it was crossing over the angle at the top of the bead, and I'm just going to make sure that that's completely flat, protecting my bead with my fingernails and my thumbnail. I'm giving that a really hearty squash, a really stern squash. What I'm doing here is super hardening the wire. We have a lady who's quite new to wire working today. So this is a way that you can utilise a very simple loop, give it a hearty squish, and it will then become something that's quite stable in wear. If you don't harden your wire and you're using the open and closable loop technique, you might find that that form doesn't stay as you want it to stay. So what we're looking for is a complete circle that ends at this angle. Once you've got that set and you're happy that it's round enough for you, You're going to protect your bead and then squishy, squishy, squishy. I mean, I'm all for unleashing the beads, but not when I don't want them to go anywhere. So what I will do now is I will centralise my central piece of chain, and I'll make sure that I'm happy with how that's hanging. And then I'm going to open up these open and closable loops. A bit of a mouthful, but that's what they are. And I'm just going to open that exactly like I would a jump ring. So at an angle, so I've got an aperture into that circular form. Welcome, Donna. Welcome, innovative treasures. Good afternoon to you. So what I'm going to do now is attach one on one side of the chain, just above. So it's a little bit close to see, but I'm just going to slide that on through. Once it's in the link of chain, I'm going to close that open and closable loop up again. And it's exactly like closing a jump ring back up. Now, obviously, I've moved the chain along, so I need to make sure that that's re-centralised now. Nice and happy that that is centralised on the piece of chain. If you get it completely wrong and it's a scrap of chain, you can just cut a link off. It's not the end of the world. So making sure again that I'm happy with that round open and closable loop. Open it like a jump ring, so you've got that access point. And then we're going to put that on the opposite piece of chain. So I believe it's this one just here. Let's just, before I close that up, make sure that is correct. Yes, that looks right. So if I flip the piece of charm wire over and close that up, give it a quick squish to make sure it's set. If I lift this up, what will happen is that there's only now a limited amount of travel. I've stopped that centralised charm and pendant connector. I've stopped it from moving too far anyway. So if you wanted to have that sense of symmetry, but you like the idea of slight mobility, there's so much going on here because the bail is a jointed bail anyway, and then you've got the movement of the charm. So that's the main feature piece of today's tutorial, utilising that Strawberry Rhubarb mix. I'm just going to show you now, you can add these charms anywhere around the necklace as well. I'm going to grab in a piece of charm from my bundle. Let's go for this fun disc and drop chain that we've got here. So with the disc and drop chain, you'll forgive me, I don't actually know what it's called. I'm going to call it a disc drop chain. You've got bars which have small apertures connecting a large loop which also has a disc dropper. So if you are going to connect a piece of this style of chain, you have the option of using a slightly lighter 20 gauge wire, which if I can find the end, we'll see if that goes through the end of those small bars. Yep, that does go through really, really neatly and easily. So you can use a lighter gauge wire. And if you make sure that you're using a reasonably long piece of wire, you can get enough wraps to make sure that that's nice and strong. What I did on my design, to show you an alternative to the norm, because that's how we would normally use this chain, when I got to the disc and drop chain in this one, I simply went into the loop that holds the two pieces of bar together. You see that in the centre between my two thumbs there. I've got two bars on either side, and then the disc drop attaches to a large ring. Now these are sealed rings, they're perfectly stable, they're not open, you can't kind of bend them out of shape too easily. So I simply, you could if you wanted to cut the bar off, but I left the bar in place and I connected into one of those large loops that hold the two bars together, and it gave me an extra additional charm drop hanging away, which is why I like this design, because it's fun. So I'm going to do the same thing now. You've seen that the other gauge, the 20 gauge round German style wire, will go into the bars if you want it to. Let's pop this back out of the way for a second. But you have the opportunity to simply use that large round loop between the bars instead. Sandy is in. Hello to you also, Sweet Pea. I hope that you are well. So I've got a little bit of wire remaining. I'm sure I've got some more on my desk, but it might be a different colour. But you know me, I like to mix my metals. So I'm just going to cut this in half and we'll work with what we've got. So these will be approximately 2-inch lengths, give or take. Now, because I'm working with limited wire at the moment, what I'm going to do is show you on one side, show you on the other side, but not connect this further and further. So what we will do now is pick a bead. So we could go for one of these. Do you know what? I don't know if this is a fossil coral or a dyed magnesite. It's got really nice feel to it, so you could go for one of those. If you want something a bit more glamorous, we've got bicones. We've also got these really funky shaped beads in that gorgeous, so Mr. Claret red from your Strawberry Rhubarb mix. I think I'm going to use a pair of these. I know I've got 2 of them left. And there we go. So let's just pop that up a little bit higher. What we're going to do to make life easier is just run this section of wire between thumb and forefinger, get it as fluid as we possibly can to begin with. I'm going to estimate where the bead would sit. It's quite a large bead. So if the bead sits centrally, I'm going to take my pliers just to the right, or just above if you prefer, to give me enough space to then make a bent end. So that bent end is probably about just over 2, let's have a look, about 3/4 of an inch. And what we're going to do is add on to the first piece of chain first. So I'm going to make quite a small loop this time. So you can see I've got that first half of a circular form, bring the tail all the way around. Now you might notice that I've already made that open. Rather than bringing the wire down like so, when I wrapped it around the pliers, I wrapped it slightly up, so that I'm quite lazy sometimes. I don't have to then open the wire up. I can simply put that onto the last piece of chain, sit that inside the circular form, and you'll see how easy it was for me to just squish that down with my thumbnail. There's not a lot of work to do once you've warmed the wire. So I'm going to hold across that circular form, not crushing the chain and not crushing where the 2 wires cross. And again, it is a very simple wrapped loop. Now, because I'm working with that 18 gauge, slightly heavier wire, let me just grab a second pair of chain nose pliers. These are my standard Beadalon chain nose pliers. A nice taper. Sometimes that can get a bit stabby in your fingertips. So to avoid that, you can use a second pair of pliers to just bring that tail of chain all the way around. And you might notice that I'm opening and closing my pliers gently as I go. And this means that the wire is just very, very gently pushed into position. Nothing too drastic or angry happens. We're always being soft enough so that the wire will do what we want it to. We don't want to break it. We want it to do what we're asking. So if your coil opens up ever so slightly, let me just bring that slightly closer to you. It's very, very slightly come open at the end. You can very carefully just squash that back into position. That's the beauty of warming your wire first. So I am just going to straighten this end section a little bit because it will make it easier for me to put the bead into position. The only issue I have now is seeing the bead hole. There we go. So what we're going to do now is take stock. We've got plenty of wire left on the right hand side as you're looking at it on my board now. So what I want to do is to support that central core wire. Please note that I'm not touching the bead. I'm always being very careful of the bead. And I'm going to push over at a right angle away from the bead. We're then going to recreate a round form, trying to keep it as similarly sized as the other side. However, because this is a bit of a jumble necklace, an odds and ends of chain necklace, it doesn't really matter if they're slightly different. So I finished up that round form again. And what we need to do now is add in the next piece of chain. So if you were using the 20 gauge, you could pop that onto the bar section. I chose to use the 18 gauge, so I need to find the loop between the 2 pieces of bar. You might be using an open chain, in which case you can just go straight into the chain. So I've added on where I want to connect my 2 pieces of chain. What I now need to do is to support that round form again. I'm not crushing the chain and I'm not crushing where the wire crosses over the angle. I'm going to start off by using my fingers to get this into position. And then I will probably end up using a pair of pliers to finish off. Now I tend to use my chain nose and my bent chain nose interchangeably. What I'm doing is using the rounded side of my chain nose pliers against the bead, and I'm very, very cautiously staying away from accidentally crushing that bead. We want to always be careful. Once we've unleashed them, we don't want to shatter them. So I'm, again, very, very small, subtle movements just to bring that very last tail of wire around until it fits flat against the core. And we've now joined 2 sections of wire. Beg pardon, I'm always talking about wire. We've joined 2 sections of scrap chain together, utilising a technique that's commonly known as rosary linking. So I will repeat that technique one more time before I love you and leave you. I'm going to take a look at the size of my bead, estimate where the bead would sit on that core wire, grip the wire just to the side of where the bead would sit, and then push an upright. The reason I do this first is because it's just less opportunities for me to accidentally smash the bead. I can be quite clumsy, and I would not like to do that. So I get the first half of the circle done in one move. And the second half, again, you should note that I have helixed that wire around the round set of pliers because it means I can just do this in one. Sometimes people may say that is lazy. The way I like to think of it is it's less use on my wrists. My wrists really suffer. So I can prolong my jewellery making by making smart tips like this. And again, we warmed that wire so I can very, very simply squish that closed. So I'm going to support the loop, and we're not squashing the wire, we're not squashing the chain. Push that around until it hurts my fingertips, and then grab my other set of chain nose pliers and draw those around. I'm going to speed this through because you've seen this once now. Again, if you do open up that coil, you can just gently manipulate the wire until it sits flat and prettily. So that looks pretty reasonable to me. You can obviously take much more time and make this perfect. So let's find a hole in the bead. Let's go for that one. If you wanted them to be symmetrical, I don't know if there's an up and a down for these. I think they just spin and then repeat. But you would want to ensure, for instance, if you were working with the big pear drops, you might particularly like to have one going up and one going down. That wouldn't work for me. I would want them both in the same orientation. So that's just something to look out for. So let us then find our second point that we want to turn the wire away. So if I push that away, you can see that I've left a gap between the end of the bead and where that angle happens, and that is so there is space for me to create these wraps of wire, which are the strength connecting your 2 sections of chain together. So again, first half of the loop, pop the pliers back in, create the second half of the loop. I've done that again in a helix. Teresa's here. Hello, honey, how are you? Hi everybody. The centre where I was getting rehab for my knee was evacuated due to flooding from Hurricane Ian. My house is not. Are you home, sweetheart? You just take care, and I hope that you're able to recuperate safely. So again, I am going to use the loop that connects the 2 bar sections rather than going into one of the bar sections. And I'm going to squish and squeeze until that sits in position. So I've added the correct part of my loop. If you accidentally put the wrong piece of chain in, or it's the wrong end, for instance, if you've got a piece that matters, sometimes the chains have got, let me just grab this bit. Sometimes the chains come with these glorious crystals embedded in them, and if you've got one at the bottom on one side and one on the top at the other side, it can, I don't know, it doesn't work for me. It might work for you. Sherby says, perfect. Bless your heart. Okay, so I'm going to squish down that circular form and start bringing the tail of wire around the core. It's tricky with the wire, with the chains trailing away underneath to see it sometimes. So all I'm going to do now is chase that chain all the way around the core until it is neat and tidy. Now, whether you're right or left dominant, you will find a way that works best for you. So what I'm going to do is switch hands now, so that I can grip the lower loop as you're looking at it with my non-dominant hand, because that's the slightly easier job. And then with my dominant hand, I'm going to do the bit next to the crystal because I have slightly greater control. So again, I'm going to make very small movements and bring that wire all the way around. Sometimes I will invert the pliers, but I will need to be focusing on that crystal to make sure I don't accidentally squish it. What can be very sad is when you've done a beautiful rosary chain and you get a little bit loose-handed, crushing and shattering one of those beads is very sad, because not only do you have to remake it, but you've lost a bead and it might be your last one of a pair. So let's just have a look at what we've created today and how you can then finish that off if you choose to. Let's get these all straightened out. So we talked about having a large loop in which we can put both the pendant and the charm, or the little charm dropper in this case. We talked about creating a lovely surround for our bead on the bail wire. We put a flat coil over the surface of the bail wire, and then we anchored that into some chain using some charms. And then we went through the process of rosary linking those pieces of chain. So that in and of itself is basically the same project. I just added a few more steps on the demonstration piece. So a little bit further up the design, I had some scraps of chain which had crystal and bar. And I didn't want to use that as linking chain, I just added it as an extra. And all I did was slid on the crystal connector parts to one of my rosary links before I added that next section of chain in. And then at the very end, I have just added a heavyweight, beautiful toggle clasp from Jessie James. Surprise hiccup on the screen there. Sorry about that. How very rude. So that's our project for today. A little bit of a bits and pieces necklace with scrap chain, and a gorgeous element of a pendant, and the Strawberry Rhubarb mix, some of which have gone back into the pot. So let's just tip that up so you can see the rest of them. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed that. Let's just pop back up and see if there are any questions. My mouse has gone to sleep. That's always good fun. I'm still here, it's still me, you haven't got rid of me, I'm sorry to say. But they are so much fun, and it's a great way to use up your leftover sections of chain. I hope that you've enjoyed the live with me. I am Gem Hawks, I'm based in the United Kingdom. I've got myself in a tangle and I've put that the wrong way through. What an absolute silly. So they're quite good fun. You can wear them long over sweaters if you've got lots of odds of chain to wear. Perfect at any time of the year, but I think I really, really am missing summer, so Strawberry Rhubarb is a beautiful heated colourway to work with. I hope that you've enjoyed that. The links to product are all in the video description. I will be back with you very, very soon. Have yourself a lovely rest of your day. Thank you for watching. Linda says beautiful. Tutao says thank you for a great tutorial. Thank you. Margaret says thank you, Gem. Sherby says thank you, well done. Linda says thank you, Gem, always. Wonderful class, says Cherie. You're all lovely. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. Any questions, just pop them in the video comments and I'll pick them up as and when I'm able to. Take care. Mwah. Bye for now.